Hi, I'm Steve Chan. I'm here with Cheryl Langdon-Orr and Jeff Neuman, co-chairs of the new gTLD Subsequent Procedures PDP Working Group. Thanks for joining me here. So I understand there's 40 plus topics within the new gTLD Subsequent Procedures PDP Working Group. So I'm wondering how you manage the process and you're able to hit a milestone where you're about to deliver an initial report for the working group.
Do you want me to grab in that first?
Sure.
Okay. It is a huge piece of work, and because of the nature and the diversity of the work, we also broke into 4 separate work tracks at the beginning of our work. So this has been hundreds, if not more, hours of community volunteer time that has been running in parallel paths on divided topics. What we've done with this interim report is bring the discussions and deliberations and any preliminary agreements and suggestions, as well as some important questions, together, trying to integrate them into a single document. But most importantly, over the last month or so, we've been going through that with the full work group, so not in stratified work tracks, but with the full PDP work group, and that's allowed everyone to reassure themselves as best as they can that it's a true and accurate record as far as we can get on what's happened, what the current thinking is. But Jeff, you might want to talk about what's different about this report to some others.
Sure. Well, this report comes about after, a program that took nearly 10 years to come together and launch, and a program that had over nearly 2,000 applications submitted. That even today we're not still completed with the delegation of all the top-level domain applications that were received in 2012. So you can imagine the number of subjects that we've had to cover. This report is a little bit different than some of the reports that have been done in the past, in that we really have tried our best to come up with the discussions, the pros and cons of different approaches taken to a number of different issues without necessarily coming up with definitive recommendations. This is because we really, when we were drilling down into the details, knew that we wanted to have more public input into the issues and the decisions that we are going to make. And so this initial report, which is well over 200 pages, that will come out next week, will
With
highlight...
about 100 questions in it, isn't it?
With over 100 questions, absolutely. Is a culmination of nearly 2 years of work of this working group. And so it makes this coming time where we're going to have a public comment period very important, because we really want to reflect what the community thinks of how the 2012 new gTLD program worked.
I guess what's important too, just if I can embellish there, we haven't made what's often seen in these things, firm recommendations based on consensus. We haven't made consensus calls on issues just yet, because as Jeff was referring to, there is so much that we would like to get public input on at this stage. We didn't want to lock it down in predefined and pre-decided, you're right, I'm wrong type attitudes. So that's going to be a little bit different, but we have made it a little bit easier. We're using annexes and appendixes, so there will be the deliberations and the questions we're asking easy to get out. Of course, we'd love to have feedback on all 200 pages if someone's got the time, the energy, and the inclination.
That approach makes a lot of sense given all the huge number of topics that you had to deal with. So I was wondering, you mentioned that the report is over 200 pages. Can you give me a sense of some of the specific topics that are in the report? And you already touched on earlier about what you're hoping to get from the public comment, but maybe you want to talk more about what you're hoping to accomplish by putting this report out and seeking public comment.
Want to check that?
Sure, I will. There are a lot of important subjects that we have in this report that's coming out next week. One of those is on what's called the Applicant Support Program, and that is a program where applicants from developing nations can apply for funding for applying for their top-level domain, but also receiving assistance in the technical services and legal services and everything else that comes with running a registry. There was definitely a feeling from this last round that that program wasn't as successful as it could be. So we really are focusing on trying to do better this time and for the future. So receiving comments on how we can make for a more successful program is certainly one area that we want feedback on. Another area that has gotten a lot of attention is in the area of communities. So the GNSO, the Generic Name Supporting Organization, in 2007 really had a policy that said that if you came from a community, that you would get priority over others that applied for the same string. And while there were a number of community-based applications, there were relatively few successful communities in the evaluation program. And there was some unhappiness over that. And so we hope, just a little bit. So we hope that this next time around, to clarify the rules for the community evaluation and to make it easier for applicants, not necessarily to qualify as a community, but make it easier for them to understand what it takes to qualify for a community. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I do actually, Jeff, because I think what you're heading towards is one of the things we've asked each of the work tracks to do all along, and that's think about looking at what happened in the last round and the applicant guidebook that was in operation, and take from the experiences out of that any learnings. Then we're looking at how we can improve process and make things more predictable. Because from an applicant point of view, there was also criticisms on certain aspects of predictability. So we're not looking at change for change's sake at all, quite the opposite. It's got to be fit for purpose and good agreement by our working community and then the wider ICANN community that this is going to make it better and more predictable.
And not just for this next round, but hopefully
Ongoing.
we're successful in creating a program that allows for the future introduction of new top-level domains for now and the foreseeable future.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm sure you'll get a lot of good feedback.
We're hoping.
I hope so. So the last question I want to ask you about is, given that there's a lot of really big, important topics that are taking a lot of the air out of the room, like
Don't say it.
GDPR and the expedited PDP on the temporary specification.
Yeah.
Why should people pay attention to new gTLDs? What's important about this topic?
Can I take this one?
You've got to
Sure.
take this one, Jeff.
That's a great question, Steve. And you know, we've both been around the ICANN community now for
A year or two.
a year or two, maybe a couple decades. And you know, there's always some issue that seems to take the attention of most of the community. But what we have to keep in mind as ICANN as an organization, and the community for that matter, is one that needs to continue to keep its eye on the mission and what ICANN was formed to do. One of those is clearly the introduction of competition in the DNS, and of course the introduction of new generic top-level domains.
Consumer choice comes in there
And
as well.
for consumer choice, and for all the reasons that we've introduced new gTLDs in the past. We can't lose sight of ICANN and the community performing what it was put into effect to do. And so the new gTLD program, is one of those aspects. And while certainly there'll be a lot of attention focused on the subjects that you mentioned, which I promised not to say, there should also be attention focused on this PDP, as well as some others that are going on in the community, because the work just doesn't stop, and ICANN as an organization needs to keep moving forward.
It's foundational work for ICANN, and most importantly, it's an opportunity to make something we've had relatively recent experience. Seems a long time ago now, 2012, but we can make a system better, and that's got to be good for us all.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, thanks Cheryl, thanks Jeff for joining me here in Panama and taking some time out of your busy schedule. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.